guess I sort of thought maybe you only spoke that way with children.
No, it's everyone. Equal opportunity.
Yeah.
Is this stuff specific to tonight, or is this just general?
You're welcome to a tool of literacy and a note card to ask questions with if you'd like.
I'm welcome to literacy.
And there's also, I'm sure you're probably already in the loop about contributing your thoughts to the library's next 20 years.
I've seen that. Thank you.
There's also a brand new fall guide, hot off the press. I think this is the very last summer program, and so next week we'll start fall. If you'd like to have a print copy of that.
I'll pass on that. Thank you so much, Beth.
Glad to see you.
Sure. Be good.
Is this specifically for libraries?
Feeling ready? Oh, Melanie, you walked in and I didn't say hello. Does Paul have some shows coming up anytime soon? Paul I'm glad to hear he's still active in that. He's wonderful. Well, pass him my hello.
So how did dogs make it into this?
Dogs,
Yeah. Wasn't that in like the subject line?
pets.
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 Oh,
That's right.
I'm not sure I'm in the know about that.
Well, every presentation does better with, pictures of dogs and cats.
Of course. Yeah, books win awards with dogs on the cover.
That's right.
All set?
Yes.
Great. Good evening. My name is Cassidy Coles. I'm a program specialist here at Johnson County Library. Thank you for attending our presentation, Demystifying County and City Government. We are highlighting this program as part of our America 250 programming. If you have questions, when you have questions, please do hold those until the end of the presentation. This room will close at 7:30. We'll want to keep respect for everybody's time and go ahead and have any side conversations and whatnot on your way out of the beautiful library. I also want to draw your attention to the bookmarks and sort of posters that are over here on the table. The 20-year plan for the library is in development now, so if you're interested in the future of the library, I think this particular audience probably is very invested and interested in what we do next. So please do give your input. There are lots of modes for giving that input. You'll find at the QR code or on our website. I'd now like to introduce you to our presenter. Hannes Zacharias is the retired Bob Kipp Professor of Practice in Public Administration at the University of Kansas in Lawrence. He has over 35 years of experience in city and county government in jurisdictions both small and large. Positions held include Management Analyst for the City of Lawrence, Kansas, City Manager for the City of Boonville, Missouri, City Manager for the City of Hays, Kansas, and Assistant County Manager, Deputy County Manager, and County Manager for Johnson County, Kansas. Thank you for joining us tonight, Hannes. We're glad to have you.
You did. Thanks, Cassie. I appreciate it very much. Is this still on? I think so. Okay, great. I want to go back and kind of start at the beginning here. From property taxes to pets is kind of the subtext of this stuff, and trying to demystify local governments here in Kansas. And I chose the title in terms of demystifying because I think all of us have experienced at some level of local government in Kansas by virtue of being here, obviously. But I think there are some mysterious portions about it that perhaps this presentation can enlighten you on as we go forward. And I did from property to pets because it was kind of an onomatopoeia, P&P, plus again, if you include dogs and cats in the presentation, you get more points that way. So, I'm glad, please take a moment to write down any questions you might have. On the cards, we'll pick them up in the middle of the presentation, and I'll try to answer those as many as possible as time allows. You've already heard my bona fides, which is great. I did have experience with the state of Kansas and the federal government before I started local government as well. And had the pleasure of working with great people in the state of Kansas as well as in Missouri. One footnote, it's not called Hays, Kansas, it's called Hays, America. That's what we typically say out in western Kansas. And I can talk to you a lot about water, but I won't do that this evening in terms of how to give water, how to take wastewater to drinking water standards, how to witch for water, how to get water out of the clouds. That was my experience in Hays, that still is going on. So let's get started. I'm going to go from general to specific, and I'm going to start really from a broad lens and talk about the history of local government and where that all started. How did we get our local government structure here in the United States? Where does it come from? And it comes from, since we are really relegants of the English system, it comes from the British Isles. But I was impressed by understanding that that local government structure in the British Isles started with Julius Caesar back in 52 BC. Where he divided up the area into various jurisdictions. The very northern part is Scotland. There's Hadrian's Wall in there, but he gave local jurisdictions the chance to have local governance within those communities. That morphed into, since that time, into the 5th century England, where we had basically the German influence come into play. And the German influence then provided the vernacular that we call right now. They called the Skiria, which were those various locations that we just saw a second ago. Those were to be shires, kind of a morphication of that. And the individual that was in charge for those process to collect the taxes was an individual that was chosen by lower class individuals to, if you will, be their emissary between local issues and the serf or the duke or the king and so forth. That was the shire reeve. That's where we get the term sheriff from. So it morphed into shire reeve to sheriff, and we bring that along from us across the British Isles as well. The name shire still continued until 1066 with the Norman Conquest. We're all familiar with that. And then fresh terms come into play. They said, no, it's not shire. It's going to be comté, which you're going to get the terms of county. So now you understand where the term comes from as far as county governments and local governments and how that comes across the Atlantic Ocean into the United States. In fact, the Virginia colony didn't have counties, it had shires to begin with. Several years later, then indeed they adopted the term as being counties, but that indeed kind of gives you a sense of the context of how local government started, and from there we kind of morphed on. That's the broad context as far as that's concerned. How we got the history of local governments is the English tradition. Spanish tradition is much different. We just came back from a long trip on Route 66, and the Spanish influence, which actually started 100 years earlier than Jamestown, did not have that level of local governments, mostly kind of providing them large territories. So now we have that context. What about, how does local government fit into the governmental structure of the United States? Where in the Constitution is there something about cities and counties? It doesn't exist, okay? So local government is controlled by the states in the United States. Not so in Great Britain and other countries, but in the United States, the states govern local governments. And it comes by virtue of the 10th Amendment, which says, I'll read it, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So that's where all the power comes in. So I'm going to be talking about broad brush United States in general terms, but also getting down to Kansas in specifics. So our local governments in Kansas is governed by the state of Kansas, the legislature, and that entire process that you're very familiar with. So now we have that context. Let's talk about the evolution of local governments. One context I will tell you, there are snippets in this presentation that hopefully will stick with you. One of which is Kansans love government. Oh, really?
What?
Kansans love government, absolutely. Because the number of governments we have per capita is the highest in the country.
Oh.
We like sewer districts, we like all sorts of things coming to that, we like to vote on everything. So I want to demystifying the idea that we don't like government, we like local government in very strong terms. Here's the evolution. First, we have counties in terms of local governments. They were providing Local government services, they were the connection between the state and local entities. That was your local kind of way to go administer activities, was through the state, through counties. That transitioned to townships back in the late 1700s, the 1780 period. The United States did not have any income tax. They were trying to go and raise revenue. How did they do that? They sold property. When they sold property, they invented the range and township system to go and figure out who the heck owned what piece of property. That's how we got the system in place of townships. And townships came in to go ahead and kind of provide an additional level of governance closer to the people, particularly in the rural areas. Well, then that really wasn't good enough. In the middle of the 1800s to present day, cities decided to come into play. And cities provided urban services such as fire, police, protection, streets, etc., libraries, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. It is interesting to meet the people that feel like, well, fire service is a mandated service. Every city's supposed to have, every individual is supposed to have fire protection. No, you're not required to. There's no requirement for that. There are places you can have no fire protection if you choose to do that. Your choice as far as that is concerned. Cities and villages were designed to go and provide that level of service going forward. In fact, if you talk about the fire service, you've ever seen the fire service has the shield on it? Remember the shield? That shield comes from the insurance carriers. Years ago, if you wanted to have your individual property protected, you bought a shield that provided money to go and pay for the fire department to come and put squirt water onto your building. Should a fire happen, let's say a fire, you have a shield on your building, but the next door building has a fire going on, the fire department comes out and squirts water, not on that building, but on your building to make sure it doesn't catch fire. People felt that was kind of inappropriate in a democratic society relying on me, so we created fire districts and fire departments becoming part of that transition. But that wasn't good enough as well, because schools were trying to go and provide a level of understanding as well, and there's a huge amount of corruption with city and county government, city and town governments particularly. So to keep schools out of politics, we created school districts. Johnson County was not immune to that. Every individual school building used to have a school district, okay? In the 1960s, we decided to go and do unified school districts. We put those school districts together. Johnson County fought that very vigorously. So we want to go and have local control. They want to go and control my building, to go and tell them how I should go ahead and educate my kids and those sort of things. So that level of specificity, that next layer of government comes into play as well, primarily in the late 1800s and also today as well. But now we have a new instance coming in, special districts, because you've heard about property tax reform, you've talked about limiting property taxes and so forth. Well, how do you get revenue? For example, in Colorado, the Tabor Amendment limited property taxes a great deal. So instead of collecting property taxes for police, fire, and streets and those sort of things, they created special districts, which makes sure that everybody has to go and pay, irrespective of the kind of property that you have. And typically, property in general, in property taxes, there are huge amounts of exemptions. Nonprofit organization, government entities, and so forth are all exempt from paying property taxes. Not so with a special assessment. So Colorado has migrated to special assessments to go and pay for those basic services. Now this level of increased amount of government structure, which Kansans love, has its consequences. A great deal of proliferation of the number of local governments, lack of uniformity in local government boundaries, problems in service coordination, voter confusion and apathy, who the hell am I voting for, and higher taxes and government spending because you have to support all that idea of that administrative overhead. But we love it. I grew up in western Kansas, and you try to consolidate anything, and you will have your house afire, no question about it. Because we have this idea of identity. I identify with Gove County. I identify with the school district. I identify with Bueller. You try to go and change that, it's very, very difficult. People's identity is very strong, and Kansas love that individual authority going forward. We have that in Johnson County. You see the number of townships we have. We have 9, actually 8, because the Monticello Township is really basically the Deffenbaugh, the old Deffenbaugh landfill. So it's kind of inconsequential. We have 6 school districts that have been unified. We have 19 cities. When I first came here in 2001, we had 20 cities. The countryside decided to dissolve itself and go with Mission. So you can actually, cities, as another kind of consequence or nuance to cities and local government in Kansas, cities can come in and cities can go away by being dissolved, and countryside decided to go ahead and do that. Oddly enough, it took them 3 votes to do that, even though each vote would lower their millage by 10 or 15 mils. You can see that power of identity. I don't want to give up my 4 or 5 block area, that identity as being countryside. Very, very powerful. Let's now talk about going back to general to a degree. Number of counties in the United States, about 1,300, 3,100 of them. What I want to point out with this map, if you can see it, you can see that the density of counties is much more on the eastern seaboard than it is on the western part of the state. I just drove, like I said, on Route 66, and you see Nevada has very large counties. We wised up because the traditional size of a county, Kansas included, was how an individual could travel on horseback in one day to get to the courthouse. So that we finally wised up to say, well, that's maybe not the way to go ahead and do things. You get further west. The administrative burden was just huge to go ahead and create smaller counties as far as that's concerned. But not every county is a county. There are variations. Standard county is the most common form of local government in most states, but there are parishes in Louisiana, different types, 64 parishes. There are boroughs and census areas in Alaska, same sort of activity. Independent cities, for example, St. Louis is an independent city, not part of any county, come into place. And there are consolidated cities and counties. We have it here in Wyandotte County, where Wyandotte County is a unified government between Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County. Indianapolis is being another example of that as well. And then there are county equivalent territories as well, the District of Columbia being part of that, Puerto Rico, etc. So not every county is by itself. But I will tell you that every county, every inch of the country is covered by a county-esque type of activity. You can't say that about all cities, but you can say that about county-esque types of activities throughout the entire country. How many cities are there in the United States? Well, about, you're looking here, about almost 20,000. What I find interesting about this graph is, look at the bottom blue line, whereas the vast majority, 16,000, are less than 10,000 people. So we love that type of government. We want to go and have our own local control of our individual borough, individual community, and those sort of things, and we're willing to pay for it to a large extent. Number of school districts, almost 13,000 school districts in the United States. And they ebb and flow, they cross county boundaries and those sort of things, so we like that as well. Just to give you a sense of how large school districts are, New York City is the largest, I think has almost 1 million students coming in from that point. This next graph reinforces the idea of the proliferation of special districts. There's a lot of special districts going on. We love them as far as that's concerned. Now you got, local fire protection districts, probably the most commonplace. You have city, other multifunctional districts, water supply districts. You have drainage districts, cemetery districts, library districts. You have mosquito districts. You have recycling districts. You have every sort of district in the world. And then we like to go and kind of be controlled over a smaller area. As county manager, I remember we had expansion of governments. I've not seen any government shrink except for countryside. We were asked, and we created a cemetery district in the southwest part of the county because there was a cemetery that nobody was maintaining. So the group of citizens can please create this cemetery district, provide a property tax deal, and we'll go and vote people in so we can actually collect revenue to maintain the cemetery bodies that were in that location. One more example of our desire for local control. The 10 states that have the highest number of local jurisdictions, Colorado is moving up rapidly because, like I said before, the Tabor Amendment said, how do you collect the revenues? They went to special assessment districts. The graph I had in other presentations is a huge spike right after the Tabor Amendment came into place to go and do special assessment districts, making that work. There's one entity that we don't talk about very much, but is very consequential as far as the United States is concerned. That's tribal governments and tribal lands. They have their own individual jurisdiction, they're individual nations, according to the United States Supreme Court. You're talking about these areas in blue that indeed are governed by those tribes, and they own that property, and how they then work in collaboration with the counties in those areas, and how they provide law enforcement, or the issues of judicial control, and the issues of policing are very profound and still going on today. We do have tribes in the United States and in Kansas as well. Prairie Band, Potawatomi, and the Kickapoo have reservations in Kansas as well. And sometimes we ignore that because it's not part of our regular discussion. I'll tell you, it's a regular discussion though in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, etc. So other states really have a great deal at stake as far as that's concerned. Let's now come back to local governments in Kansas and kind of talk about a little bit local governments in Kansas in general. We have 105 counties, we have almost 630 different cities, we have 1,300 to 1,400 active townships, 1,500 special districts, all of which require a vote, all of which requires someone to go and run for office, all of which have a portion of the property tax mill levy going forward that way. So governance again in Kansas is one of the highest number of general purpose governments in the per capita in the country. So that reinforces what I said earlier, that Kansans love government. We don't like big government, we love local government that we can put our fingers on or hands on and be able to govern my particular entity going forward. Let's talk about Kansas county governments. County governments, they're, like I said, every state has that, the requirement to set up the local governments. Kansas is no exception. In the Kansas Constitution, that's what provides for county governments. County governments, the legislature shall provide for organizing new counties, locating county seats, changing county lines, etc. No county seat shall be changed without consent of the majority of the electors of the county. Very controversial, because you can't consolidate counties if that's a requirement. Nobody wants to give that up. The northern line can be county changed so as to include an area less than 432 square miles. So at least we put that caveat in place to kind of at least keep the size a manageable size. Counties did not come automatically with statehood. We have the first counties coming into statehood. You see on the eastern side, that's the black and yellow hash lines that way. We were part of the original counties that came in as far as Kansas is concerned, but you can see as we moved west, we started adding more counties coming forward here. The last set of counties coming in 1880, and actually we had some consolidation with Finney County actually morphing into a larger county later on as well. Now that we understand kind of county governments and so forth, let's talk about what county governments are required to go ahead and do, since they are supposed to be the agents of the state. Kansas counties have two major roles to go ahead and do, every county in Kansas. The first is to serve as an administrative arm of the state government. Legislature is in session for those 90 days, 120 days, and when they're not in session, those laws get administered through whom? Through county governments by and large. That's their big version of it. Additionally, provide locally determined services as the county would like to go ahead and do. So as an administrative agent of the state government, what are those specific processes? One of those is to administer elections. So all the elections are done by each county individually, typically through the elected treasurer of that county. There are 5 counties in Kansas that have election commissioners appointed by the Secretary of State, and Johnson County is one of those. That's a big function, and that's going to be under huge scrutiny coming up for November as far as how those elections are done, but it's done by each individual county. Additionally, handle many taxation processes, including property appraisal, and we'll talk in a second. The difference between appraisal and valuation, assessments, 2 different things. We're talking about collection of all those taxes. When you write your property taxes, you write it to the Johnson County Treasurer, and that person in the office distributes it to 4 ways from Sunday. All the various jurisdictions get a piece of that pie. It is a mathematical mindset to go and figure out which individual location, each individual parcel is probably unique in itself about the overlapping type of taxes and special assessments being required. Neighborhood district, industrial revenue bonds, tax exemptions, etc. Issues licenses and permits. When you register your vehicle, you go through Johnson County, registering your vehicle. Maintain land records. Register of deeds and the geographical information system. If indeed your property is not registered in the county, you don't own it. Period. That's Register of Deeds' purpose at that point. And there are historical consequences of that. My home county, Ford County, until police got it resolved, would routinely go to Ford, pick up the safe with all the property records and move it over to Dodge City, and then a group from Ford would come over and take the safe, bring it back to Ford, because wherever that resides is where the county seat is, where the property records are. So we finally figured that out and decided where it's going to be. Provide facilities and equipment for the judiciary. The state of Kansas pays for the judges, but each county has to pay for the courthouse, the jail, and all the ancillary services as far as that is concerned. And when counties are required to go and finance prosecution, for the county and district attorneys to go ahead and pay for that. In addition to those kind of administrative arms of the state are required to do, there are these mandated services. Counties don't actually have to provide them themselves, but they have to ensure that they get provided, either by contract or some mechanism. Public health services, county by county. Each county is basically the Department of Health, the Board of Public Health. There's been some changes with that, but that's one of their big responsibilities. Mental health services, developmental support services, those individuals who are developmentally disabled. Emergency management done on a countywide level. Law enforcement and jail. Solid waste planning. Not that they have to go and have solid waste, they don't have to own the facility, but they have to ensure there's some sort of plan in place, that our trash goes someplace that does not cause disease and those sort of things. Law enforcement, jails, transportation, roads and bridges, noxious weed eradication. It was always interesting to me that in Johnson County we have, every year we have a report about the noxious weeds in Johnson County. They're significant Johnson weeds to go and take care of. And it changes every year depending what it is. The big one that I remember is bindweed, which was brought in on purpose, but now it's a noxious weed. Interesting tidbit that way. Counties also can do locally determined services. What might those be? Hospitals, various medical services, home health care, assisted care, nursing care. Johnson County used to have a nursing home. We're now divorcing ourselves off of that particular venture and making it more privatized. Culture and leisure services, parks, libraries, zoos, museums, other cultural facilities. Economic development for the area that's typically outside of cities. Planning and zoning, airports, utilities, etc. That might be you might want to pick up doing. Johnson County actually operates the largest sewer system in the state, that being with the sewer system we have right now. If you look at kind of just give you a sense of those number of counties that actually do hospitals, it's quite a few. The ones that are dark gray. This has been a challenge because since Kansas has not expanded Medicaid, those hospitals are under more fiscal stress, requiring the counties to go ahead and increase the amount of taxes to go ahead and support those hospitals, or purely having them being lost for a community. We talk about zoning. Zoning is not a requirement. These counties have zoning, the rest do not. And why that is a concern, because I'll tell you an example. When I was in Ellis County, they've now changed that. People would decide to go ahead and take their house and build their beautiful house out in the unincorporated area. County had no zoning. They had a nice deck on the back. When you have zoning, you don't have building codes either. They had a big party, about 30 or 40 people in the back deck. It collapsed. They said, "Oh my God, we got to go and sue the county because they didn't." No, don't sue the county. You decided to go ahead and build in a place that had no zoning, no building codes. That's your fault. So not every county is required to go and have building codes or zoning in terms of those activities. The second big nail in the coffin, if you will, to urge them to go and adopt zoning is beautiful subdivision outside of town. A hog farm decides to come in and locate right across the fence. No problem, no zoning. You have no regulations. So that finally convinced the county commission to go ahead and try to pursue zoning, which was very difficult because the county commissioners really had death threats and so forth. We care about our property. We don't want to have anybody tell us what to do with our property. That was a consequence. Finally got to that point, but my point here is saying that zoning and planning are not ubiquitous across the state, nor is it across the state in Missouri either. It depends on the individual jurisdiction. What about city governments? Well, city governments indeed, again, are measure of the state, and the legislature shall provide a general law applicable to cities for the incorporation of cities. You get that point? Cities are corporations. They're not really agents. They're a corporate body. So as a corporation, they can go into existence, they can go out of existence. They're not required to go and do any services. They can do some services or none of the services, depending on what they want to go ahead and do. So they can be dissolved that way. Were every city in Johnson County decided to dissolve, then the sheriff would be required to go and provide that level of oversight and law enforcement in the county. But there's no requirement that you have to have a city. One of the youngest cities we have is Overland Park, right? Over 50 years old, I believe, here just recently. Kansas cities are municipal corporations, and why that's important is because you can be a city commissioner, and you can also be a legislature. Because in Kansas, county commissioners and county offices are also state office holders, and you can't have more than one state office. So Olathe, for several years, has had both a city commissioner and a state representative. They occupy both positions. In fact, we have one of our state representatives be the Speaker of the House as well. So that's an important distinction, that cities are corporations. They're different from counties as far as the state is concerned. They can have large staffs like Wichita, or no staff at all. Quivira, I think, has one employee, but they contract everything out. Contract for fire service, police service, and those sort of things to go ahead, and they're kind of a glorified homeowners association. They can choose whatever services they want. So there's some general rules that I think across the country in Kansas we use for city governments that may be helpful. And the general rules are the two big buckets for local governments in the United States, called Dillon Rule communities and counties and Home Rule communities and counties or states. What do you mean by Dillon's Rule? Well, back in the 1800s, 1868, a town on the eastern side of Iowa was complaining that the railroad wanted to come in and put the railroad right through the center part of town. They said, you can't do that, we're a city, we got jurisdiction over here. So they go to the Supreme Court, and the Judge Dillon says, let me look at it more quickly. No, guess what, you're an agent of the state. And unless there's a specific situation that gives you that authority, you have no authority at all. Remember that the railroad's got authority to go and put railroads throughout the entire country and 40 acres on either side of the railroad. So they had jurisdiction, and Iowa wanted to go and have the railroads come on through. They said, no, you have no jurisdiction. You're a creature of the state. Get out of here. What that means is that unless you have specific authority to do something in those states, you can't do it. It sometimes goes as far if you're in a community in a certain state, in a Dillon rule state. If you don't have the authority, they will tell you exactly how wide the road to make it, how deep the asphalt should be, and so if they don't get the kind of authority, you can't do it. It's what I call the cookbook method of legislation. The state gives you that authority, great. They don't give it to you, you don't have any as far as a local jurisdiction. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is called home rule. And home rule basically is that, read in the Kansas Constitution, it is in the Kansas Constitution, cities are hereby empowered to determine their own local affairs and government, including the levying of taxes, excises, fees, charges, and other exactions. Except when if the levying of any tax, excise, fee, charge, or other extraction is limited or prohibited by the enactment of the legislature, and they have done that way, and applicable uniformly to all cities of the same class. Where have we seen this play out? Well, we saw here recently with regards to Lawrence wanting to go and do plastic bags, elimination of plastic bags. They used their home rule authority to say there was no legislation prior to that situation saying that cities could not regulate plastic bags. They said, we're going to use our home rule authority and do that. There's a process you have to go through, and we can talk about it later on if you'd like. But that process said, Lawrence, we're going to stop selling plastic bags. The legislature comes back in the next year and says, oh, no, we're not going to make it uniform. No city can regulate plastic bags, and they have that authority. Another example is Saline County. Saline County wanted to go ahead and control some measure the proliferation of shooting law enforcement officers. There's no law in Kansas regulating handguns, is for sure, but not regulating ammunition. So Saline County said, we're going to regulate and not allow what they call metal-jacketed ammunition to be sold in Saline County using their home rule authority. The most recent example of that, most of you experienced in Johnson County, how many of you purchased beer or alcohol on a Sunday? Okay, there you go. You do that because of home rule. Well, NACSA found out that indeed the alcohol restrictions in Kansas were not uniformly applied to all jurisdictions of cities. Certain classes could do it in certain ways and certain classes could do it different ways. They said, we're going to use our home rule authority to go and allow sales on Sunday. They put it in place, it passed all the various kind of loopholes, and now you see many cities in Johnson County have adopted that same rule to allow for Sunday sales. There's no state law that says you can do it, but home rule authority allows that to occur. So I find that very interesting. The state legislature tried to come back and usurp that and make it kind of universally different, and they weren't able to go and provide that level of intervention. So it kind of is a back and forth battle. So that's an important thing to recognize. Dillon's rule for local governments, statewide, or home rule or association like we have in Kansas. Kansas is not 100% home rule because of all the exceptions, but you get the general content. I like that idea because it goes into the general philosophy that most Kansans want to have, in my viewpoint, which is that's locally governs best. And we want to have local control over our particular neighborhood, our particular jurisdiction, and one size fitting all from the state, we tend to go ahead and kind of rail against in some degree. So in summary, for the cities and counties typically have more departments than cities do. Johnson County, we have 38 departments, we whittled it down to 32, but that's not unusual. Many counties have very many departments. The more elected officials, elected treasurer, elected clerk, elected register of deeds, of course, the district attorney, the sheriff, the commissioners, and so forth, waiting for that point. The big division is that typically in Kansas, county governments are partisan, Republican, Democrat, and so forth, as opposed to cities which are nonpartisan. Saying there are no Republican, Democrat, or independent potholes or those sort of things. Just fix this sucker to move on from that kind of situation. There are exceptions. One of those exceptions is Johnson County. We are a nonpartisan county. So is Wyandotte County, and so is Greeley County as well. Cities are nonpartisan. Cities don't have mandated services. Do what you want to. City council members can be either state officials as well as state officials, and more flexible revenue sources as well because they're a corporation. So now we're talking about the county structure, the general laws of governing counties and cities. let's talk about management. And one of those is city council, council manager form of government / commission manager form of government, which most cities in Johnson County have. Or the mayor council strong mayor form of government, which really being debated right now in Kansas City, Missouri, but more pronounced, I think, in Jackson County. Or the commission form of government, which basically you have an individual running for police commissioner or fire commissioner or those sort of things that may not have any experience in those areas but decide to run for office. Most recent example is Portland, Oregon. Portland just migrated away from this and went to a city manager form of government style to get away from the commission style of government. Topeka had it for many, many years and went away from that about 10 or 12, 15 years ago as well. Professional management, I think, is important. So I want to show you a short video here about the differences between strong mayor form of government and council management form of government. I think that's an important thing about how this rose. Professional management rose out of the era of huge corruption, most notably the Pendergast era. People say it was appropriate to make sure that the individuals the organizations were hired and fired people based upon their qualifications, not based upon their contributions to campaigns and so forth. That was a major tenet. So here's the distinction between the two.
Which form of local government provides the best structure for community success? You are probably familiar with the mayor-council or strong mayor form. Here, the people elect one politician, the mayor, to lead the community, hire staff, and oversee all day-to-day operations and service delivery. Having a single politician at the top of the structure has its disadvantages. The elected council is largely unable to effect change because the mayor is solely responsible for the budget and staffing. Political agendas can contaminate what should be transparent, ethical, and efficient service delivery. And it also leaves that go-to person more susceptible to the influence of special interest groups, leaving ordinary voters with less say about what goes on in their community. The council manager form of government was created to combat corruption and provide for the professional management of local governments. In the council manager form, the people elect a council, including a mayor, and they collectively create a vision for the community and set policy. The council then hires a non-political professional manager based on experience and credentials who implements the council's policy and delivers services equitably. The manager remains accountable to the council because if at any time the council decides that person is ineffective, they can vote to replace the manager. Having the entire elected council setting policy makes it difficult for special interest groups to influence policy. But the council manager form of government isn't just about curtailing corruption. It's about managing services in ways that get better results. An IBM report found that council manager cities are nearly 10% more efficient than mayor-council cities. Historically, nearly 2/3 of U.S. municipalities with Moody's AAA bond ratings are council manager, as are the majority of all America's city award recipients. So visit icma.org today to learn more about how your community can adopt or retain the council manager form of government.
And you're seeing this debate play out right now in Jackson County. I mean, that's what Frank White is. Frank was a strong mayor and so forth. And it took a vote of the public to go ahead and remove that person from office, as opposed to if there was a commission form of government with a manager, that manager could be removed immediately on a majority vote of the governing body. So that's still kind of ongoing discussion, but that's still around this area as well. Let's talk about financing, which is I think people are talking about from property taxes to pets, right? Property and sales taxes fuel local governments in Kansas. That's the biggest revenue sources, not much beyond the no income taxes and so forth regarding that. But let's focus in on property taxes. And before we go into the details here in Kansas, let's talk about the history of taxes. Gosh, we've had it for 6,000 years BC. Nobody likes taxes. Humans don't like taxes, okay? You know, those sort of things have been around for a long, long time. The clay tablets that are in Iraq are evidence to that. The primary focus of early property taxation was land and its production value. Taxes were levied against the value of grain, cattle, oil, beer, and land. I like the picture you see in the lower left because look at the cantilevered house as far as that's concerned in Europe. You were taxed on the size of property you had. So let's go ahead and cantilever out and get more space and not pay any more taxes. The same thing occurs in Italy. Look at the tall towers. The tall towers are there because your tax are based upon the square footage you occupy on the property, not how tall the building is or how valuable the building is. So we've had this conflict for a long time. The Rosetta Stone was indeed was famous for actually a tax document granting exemption to priests. So we've also, put in memorial services, taxation against priests and so forth as well. So this discussion about property taxes is well understood, well worn in human history. I just want to kind of reinforce that. In Kansas, though, there is legitimate reason, in my viewpoint, for confusion because you have all these overlying districts on an individual piece of property. You've got the city taxes, you've got the county taxes, you've got the state taxes, you've got federal taxes and so on. You've got school taxes, all the special assessments and so forth. It can be really confusing about what portion of your tax goes to where and why. That's been a long-standing issue, and that can provide a level of confusion, but you already heard the information about the number of jurisdictions we have, and we're unwilling to give those up or consolidate for a huge amount of reasons. Let's go back let's talk about mill levy. Oh joy, we're going to talk about mill levy. Just give an understanding of that, and it's basic stuff, and many of you may already know, but I find it helpful. One or two people may not understand it. The term mill is basically the tax rate that is applied to the assessed value, not the appraised value, the assessed value of your property. 1 mill is $1 per $1,000 of assessed value. If my house is assessed value of $12,000, 1 mill would raise $12. Get it? Okay? That's pretty straightforward that way. But it kind of multiplies as far as that is concerned. But some key terms here just talked about. The appraised value is different. And a qualified appraiser makes that judgment in Kansas based upon what they feel is the fair market value within a very contemporaneous time, the last year. And we went through issues in Kansas, which had to change the Constitution to make sure that we had fair appraisers on a regular basis that at least tell you how much the value is of your property from that point. The assessed value is different. The Kansas Constitution says that for the assessed value of your taxes, you take your appraised value for your house and multiply it times 11.5%. I don't know why, that's what they have in the Constitution. There's a lot of debate about that. Okay, 11.5% of what your appraised value is. That's your assessed value. For agriculture, it's 30% based upon income. Utilities, 33%. Commercial, industrial, 25%. If indeed they are not exempt from taxes. So if we talk about that in appraisal, let's talk about there's a lot of discussion about appraisals and so forth and property values. Let's look at a little video here about what an appraiser does.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding about the role of appraisers and how they affect the property tax that homeowners pay. When someone hears the term appraiser, they seem to think of a scary figure reaching for their wallet. Not so. Appraisers don't set tax rates. Appraisers don't chase tax dollars. An appraiser is interested in fairly determining property values, and they take great pride in it. Property tax is determined by a simple formula. Appraisers only affect one of these variables, the value. And they do so with incredible accuracy. Appraisers aren't tax collectors or even tax setters. They're just fellow taxpayers, and their primary goal is to make everything fair and equitable. Imagine that you are in a restaurant with two friends. One orders a hot dog, one a plate of caviar, and you order a steak. The waiter comes to the table with a total bill of $100, but he doesn't know how much each of you should pay. If everyone paid the same amount, the guy who ordered caviar might be happy. But what about the guy who ordered a hot dog? Enter appraisers. The food is your property. Just like these meals, some people's property is worth more than others. And it's the appraiser's job to determine how much each property is worth. That's it. So in the same way the value of these menu items would need to be determined, an appraiser places values on properties to ensure fairness and equity. After the appraiser determines the value of each property, local governing bodies will set their budgets for the coming year. They set the tax rate in order to produce the dollars needed for their budgets. The value of a property does not affect the amount of property tax needed. The sum total of all these budgets is a set number that has to be divided up among all the property owners. So even if everyone's value was cut in half by the appraisers, the tax rate would be raised in order to generate the same amount of tax revenue. The appraisers don't determine the taxes you pay. They just determine the values of properties to keep everything as fair and equitable as possible. When you notice a change in your property's appraised value, the change is the result of a never-ending quest for fairness and accuracy. Appraisers are graded on their performance, so there is a detailed system to get accurate valuations. First, the appraiser looks at similar properties that have sold, their sale prices, and the terms and conditions of each sale. That's the reason your home won't just be compared to the place next door. Studying things like square footage, age, and location helps appraisers determine how comparable another property is to yours. Even seemingly small details, like an extra bathroom or finished basement, can result in significant differences in value in two otherwise identical homes. Appraisers maintain a thorough database of real estate information to make this process as precise as possible. Changes in value are typically the result of local real estate market sales or major changes to a property. Remodel a kitchen or finish a basement, and your property's value could increase. When you see your home's appraised value, you can rest assured that the number has not been drawn out of a hat, nor generated with anything but equity and accuracy in mind. Long story short, appraisers are here to help, not trying to hinder. Their focus is accurate values, not tax collection. The only things an appraiser chases are fairness and equity, and they take great pride in it.
So that includes a little about what appraisers do versus the assessed valuation. So I'm going to go through this and kind of give you an example. This is our property 2025. This is our tax bill. You can see down the bottom, Johnson County, it says 0.0172001. That's 17.29 mils, okay? Let's take that as an example. Our appraised value at that time was about $443,000. It's gone up, yes, everyone's has. Assessed valuation of 11.5%, that makes our assessed value $51,000. So 1 mil would generate $51, right? Following me? So the county's portion. 17.29 mils times the assessed valuation divided by 1,000 equals the $881, which is on an annual basis. That's not what you pay annually, but that's basically $73 a month for all the services the county provides. I don't think that's a bad deal. But I think that's an individual choice to make that happen. But that's how that works for all those individual entities. When you look at all these up, you add that up for your entire top property tax bill. In this case, about 50 mils goes to schools. I'm not bemoaning that. I moved here to Johnson County because of a great school system. But if you look at the amount of various taxes, you kind of get a sense of where the taxes go. That's not the only thing that we have in taxes as far as Kansas is concerned is property taxes. We also have sales tax and compensating use tax, which is the tax you're supposed to pay on that Amazon purchase, as far as that's concerned, the things that come off the internet. The sales tax is basically 45 states have sales taxes, including Kansas. We started out back in the 1930s at 2%, now it's about 6.5%. This range of sales taxes in Kansas is County 6.5%. They don't have any other sales taxes. And Coffeyville, it has almost a 12% sales tax rate. So they have other things going on as well. You can see the 5 states that don't have sales taxes. They have other sources of revenue. Kansas sales tax, what do you pay sales taxes on? Rental or leases of tangible personal property and utilities. Labor services, but only on tangible personal property. Admissions, meals, drinks, motor vehicles, etc. You can see that whole list there going to that website. Here's what you don't pay sales taxes on in Kansas. Labor services in general, doctors, lawyers, accountants, that part of the economy that is expanding dramatically. That's off the sales tax rolls. Aircraft, you buy a $270 million Learjet, you don't pay a farthing in sales taxes. Food, except for local sales taxes in general in Kansas. Farm machinery, that $300,000 farm all tractor, no sales taxes. All the equipment and all the fertilizer and so forth, no sales taxes. Broadcasting equipment, I don't know why. Drill bits, same thing. Veterinary and drugs, farm equipment, machinery, railroad parts, materials, used for interstate commerce, plus a slug of others. How many? About 2 or 3 pages of exemptions on sales taxes. So what happens if indeed everything gets exempted? That means that what was left to go ahead and have to pay more, right? That's not a Republican, Democrat, independent viewpoint. That's just how the system is working right now for us as we go forward. Kansas is in the middle of the pack for sales taxes nationwide, about 8.9% currently, 8.7%, and certainly not leading it. California, you have some others that are a little bit higher as well, kind of in the middle of the pack. Other taxes that come into place, well, motor vehicle taxes, we talked about that, the tax you pay on your motor vehicles. Gas taxes, 18.4% a gallon goes to gas is the federal tax right now. And the state of Kansas adds 25.04 cents. So they don't, that's not increased by virtue of the price of gasoline increasing, it's still that same amount going forward to go and pay for our roads and highways. Excise fees, as a new development comes in, adds more, wherewithal, on police, fire services. The city can go ahead and provide an excise tax for the developer to pay, compensate communities for that. Remember that user fees are not taxes. So your sewer bill, your water bill, those are things that aren't taxes, that's a user fee. That's much like a special assessment. There's a distinction, I think, we talk about what is going to be different. So we're arguing about that portion of property taxes that paid for fire, police, etc., those basic services, not for sewer, water, etc., which go on a regular basis. I want to wrap up, so I'm going to get to your questions, and Casey will help me at that point. But yes, pets in Kansas, can I label it right? So property tax has been passed. There is a whole body of law about pets in Kansas. Statutes talk about the idea of licensing, inspect pet breeders, boarding kennels, pet shops, etc., standards of care, adequate feeding, etc., managed by the Department of Agricultural Animal Health Department. Well, we know that that's at the overlying area for the state of Kansas. We have pets in Overland Park. Requirements here. The age requirement, all dogs and cats must be licensed by 6 months of age or within 30 days of moving to the city. A current rabies certificate is required to obtain a pet license and pet limits. You can have 4 dogs and or cats at a single residence without a permit, but more than you gotta have more activities. That's distinctly different than Westwood, that indeed has different jurisdictions, household limited to 3 dogs and cats. Going from that point, vaccinations are mandatory for dogs and cats. My point is that if you live in a jurisdiction, you probably need to check about what that jurisdiction deals with, even with dogs and cats. But I find the pictures really cute, and I hope you do as well as far as that is concerned. In summary, local governments are creatures of the state in the United States. Not so in Great Britain, a whole different level of governments. The United states control local governments. Kansans love government. I will reinforce that activity. Local government, local control. We want to vote for Hana Zacharias or boot Hana Zacharias out. We want to have that level of personal kind of contact. Home rule is important. I think it is anyway. That an individual's jurisdiction should be able to go ahead and govern themselves and be able to go and say one size does not fit all. Appraised values and assessed values are distinctly different. They're different. And finally, taxes have been an issue for thousands of years. Nobody wants to pay it. Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the person by the tree, right? That's not what's going to work. Thank you, and we'll take questions. Appreciate it. Thank you. This one? Gotcha. Thank you, our lovely assistant. She's trying to ask her to consolidate these questions here. Good. The first one here, make sure thank you for that help. How do you know which form of government controls a given community, is that right? Given jurisdictions?
I'm sorry.
Given citation?
Uh-oh, my handwriting, oh no. Oh, situation.
Given situation.
So the things they wondered about are here in
Has
particular.
materials, tax dollars directed to unintended audits, permitting and development. The answer is, it depends. I hate saying it, but it's probably the way to go and say it. It does deal with, the way I would approach it is go from general to specific. Google and AI, I have my own feelings about it, to be honest about it. But if you're wanting to ask AI and talk about certain statutes in state government about certain jurisdictions, it'll give you a list you can start looking at. And winnowing down. Typically, the state of Kansas provides a broad bucket, and individual jurisdictions can go ahead and be more specific or more restrictive in that situation, but not more expansive typically in those cases. I say typically because the state of Kansas now has made rulings on zoning, saying that in many cases that accessory dwelling units and individual apartments, duplexes are allowed by right in almost every zoning district. So that's a different thing going on. But I would generally say going from general to specific, just doing some Google searches would be a way to go and start. If you're talking about hazardous materials, it would be a way to go and say, are you talking about disposing of hazardous materials or transporting hazardous materials? what that means is different. Transporting, you get into federal law as well, and what the jurisdiction might be. There might be actually conflicting jurisdictions that to say what a deed should be. There might be some jurisdiction that says you can't go ahead and haul hazardous materials, but the state of Kansas says you can. So there are these conflicts that arise with the levels of government we have. Tax dollars directed to, as intended, to make sure they go in for audits and so forth. It depends on which audit you're talking about and who's being audited. Is what I would say. If it's an audit with regard to the city of Lenexa, the Lenexa would be the jurisdiction over that versus other communities. Permitting and development in the county and zoning. If it's in the area that is unincorporated, not part of a city, the county governs that. So the county is the overlay, but only really talks about zoning in those areas that are not occupied right now by cities. And about 40% of the county is unincorporated. Outside of city jurisdictions. That's dwindling, but not as rapidly it was back in the 1970s and 80s. How to escalate existing or known infrastructure concerns, street repairs. The best way, I think, is street repairs are typically jurisdiction of cities, so as to go and be advocates in your city and city councils. And the way I always start is talk, first of all, to your council representative. The council member who represents your area. That's a good place to start. And to let them know you're concerned about it, and then really working with the staff about what those concerns are. And then being an advocate, going to city council meetings and so forth. I would urge people to add more light than heat at these conversations. My personal pitch is that, city council members are people too. And they don't get paid a hell of a lot of money to go and take the vitriol that some of us scout out of them, and we're all trying to go and do this together. And I would encourage people to have some grace, not to give up, but to have some grace in the conversation as we go forward in this collective environment. We talk about self-governance. That's my personal spiel. So I did talk to your council member and get information about what is happening and what isn't. Talk to staff. Typically there is in Johnson County. Many of the cities have 5-year programs. They can tell you, well, you're on the slate to go and be improved on 2028 in November. I can't be that specific about Missouri, but I think Kansas and Johnson County the cities in Johnson County really do a good job of trying to manage where traffic goes and where dollars occur. Who runs elections in Johnson County? It indeed is the Johnson County Election Commissioner, and she was recently appointed. Connie, I forget her last name.
Smith.
Thank you. She just got appointed here recently, about a year ago, so she's handling it. It's her shop, period, with the oversight of the Secretary of State. So that's the answer.
I think the one you're there is whether we could elect that person.
Oh, part. Who runs elections? No.
Oh, sorry. There's
Could we elect Johnson County election? Could we elect Johnson County election commissioners? No. Kansas statute has declared that indeed the 5 biggest counties are appointed by the Secretary of State, who require state legislation to change it. Why they made that change, I think there's some good reasons for it, because an individual can run to go and be a treasurer without really having the skills to go ahead and run a large-scale election. They are very specific jobs that require a lot of training and professionalization of that. People actually get master's degrees from one place, Auburn University, about how to go and run elections. So it's a very specific and daunting task to do elections. So the state of Kansas felt like in the 5 largest counties, they did not want to leave that subject to someone getting a very good election campaign, but having no skills in actually running an election. So those 5 counties know until the statute changes. Ideal funding for schools, how much do they need? The ideal funding for schools, the property taxes, I think is a good measure for it. I think what is my frustration with school taxes is the level of complexity. Because most of the property taxes that is levied by schools, as far as I know, goes to the state of Kansas, and then is parceled out based on the per capita or per pupil formula that legislatures put together. And it becomes very difficult, like going into a black box and it comes out, here's how much money you get. So that's my frustration with the schools, is that the clarity is not there about what's going on. It's done for good purposes to equalize that those that have money, i.e. Johnson County, do not make sure that they can afford everything, and those out in Gold County get nothing. I can appreciate that, but it becomes very complicated. The ideal tax, I don't think property tax is bad. The property tax was put in place, frankly, in the 1930s during the Depression because they felt it was the most stable tax. It was not subject to sales taxes or so forth. Kansas have valued education almost everything else. You look back in the 1880s and 1890s, how communities grew in the state was by virtue of bringing in the school teacher, right? And provide a level of continuity in education that was then reinforced by virtue of the extension councils and about the Grange movement and so forth, all that were designed to go and provide additional education for people in Kansas. And so I think traditionally Kansans have really wanted to make sure education stays vital, at least K through 12, and they felt property taxes was the most stable to do that. Does that answer your questions? Yes, sir.
The other 55 counties in Kansas, how do they assign their election commissioners?
They are voted on by the county treasurer is the election commissioner. So it's the actually, I let the other 100 counties, because there's 105 counties, the rest of their counties are treasurer. That's okay, no problem that way, but that's, they're all elected, the treasurer runs the elections. That's right. David?
So, with the special assessment, special districts, things like that, how does that fit in with what they did with the Chiefs Stadium? Because the state was part of that, the county was part of it, and then it was all the other stuff. How does that all fit into?
The state of Kansas is basically bargaining away their portion of the sales tax. That's 6.5%, right? And what they're basically saying is that the jurisdiction, the overlay districts of several counties, Wyandotte County, parts of Johnson and kind of those areas, should the sales tax amount, as I understand it, for the county writ large, let's say it's called $1 million, it's not right, $1 million, but when the Chiefs come in, it goes to $1.5 million, okay? And the sales tax on that $500,000 with 6.5% sales tax goes to the state, the rest goes to the cities. The state is then going to take that amount of money and pay off the bonds for the stadium. So they're giving up the forecasted increase in revenue. And the concern is that by giving up that forecasted amount of revenue, then there'll be other issues down the line that will not be able to be covered, requiring taxes to increase someplace else to pay for education, pay for highways or something else. The hope is that the amount of increase of the economy by having the Chiefs Stadium here will offset those losses. That there'll be so much economy being derived that will come forward. And that's not unusual. Lawrence is doing the same thing with their stadium, with the football stadium there. Many cities do that as well. It's called tax increment financing, betting on the outcome of increased economic development that these things will spur.
So how do the counties, how do the counties get asked to contribute? Doesn't they do something similar?
The state was asking the counties to contribute their portion of the sales tax. The sales tax, they're about the same Johnson County, you have 8 cents roughly. 6.5% is the state, then you've got about 2 cents that is the county, you've got maybe 3 cents that's the city. So the state was asking the counties to give up their portion of the sales tax revenue as well. I think Johnson County has said no. I think Wyandotte County is still considering. So I think that's the debate. Shall they give up their portion of the increased revenues that the counties are being involved with? Does that help?
Yeah.
I mean, it is all betting on the outcomes. They're asking the county to give it its portion, and counties are saying, no, I don't think so. If you want to give up your state's portion, that's the deal you made, but we're going to stick with that. Yes, sir.
So the federal government's divided up into states, the states are divided up into cities and counties, well, counties, but then often cities and populated areas. There's one organization I've heard of that has a lot of influence in the KC region on both sides of the state line called MARC,
Yes.
Mid-America Regional Council. What is their constitutional basis for existence?
They don't have a constitutional basis. What they have is a requirement from the federal government for planning services. They got put into place regional councils by virtue of the Federal Highway Administration. The Federal Highway Administration basically on the heels, as I understand it, of the interstate highway system in the 1957. We're giving you guys money, but not unless you plan collectively. So you gotta bring the reason, you gotta go and figure out where the hell these roads are gonna go. Because we're not gonna give you a bunch of money and just kind of have it be printed away without any plan. So they came into existence by virtue of that.
Okay.
MARC is funded on a voluntary basis. The communities that are part of that contribute voluntarily to go and make those things work. And I know that because I had a chance to be part of the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Council for Emergency Management. And it's on a basically a field, it's on a voluntary basis. Hopefully you'll contribute dollars to to go and help us coordinate emergency responses in the face of a bombing or a tornado or those that get cut across various jurisdictions. There's 119 different cities in the metro area. So trying to coordinate those services is really what Mark does. And they've been asked to go ahead and coordinate services for aging services, for daycare facilities, for emergency management, for environmental purposes. It's all been on a request basis based upon their governing body, which is primarily city council, city mayors and so forth in the region saying, we need to work together. One of the crystallizing events I think that happened with Mark, we reflected upon that, is the Hyatt disaster, where the region had a very poor response to that horrendous activity. And that sparked the region to go and say, we can do something better. We can try to organize ourselves in terms of how ambulances and fire and police coordinate their services. It was a pitiful response. And large activities kind of reinforce the idea that we have to work collectively and collaboratively as a region, irrespective of the state boundaries. Flooding has no concern for the state boundary, those sort of things. Terrorism acts that have those sort of things, that have no boundaries that way. That's how that came to place. It's all inter-organization.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
Right.
Hannes, for this
Thank
wonderful
you.
presentation. From the very contextual to the very granular, I really enjoyed hearing the connections between all of the ways that this grand experiment works. We'd also like to highlight programs that are happening this fall. We'll be partnering with the Johnson County Post for candidate forums. Dates will be announced soon, so keep your eye on the website. Or ask the librarians as you're in our buildings. Thank you so much for attending this program. Again, the room will be closing now, but you're welcome to gather in the library proper and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you one more time, Hannes.
One thing, if you would like, I can certainly give you a PDF version of my PowerPoint if they would like. If you'd like to have people access it, we certainly can do that.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
Is that a thing that you have met with, or is it more like a link?
I'll have to, I'll just send it to you.
Great.
I'll go and make
Thank you very much, very informative.
Thank you very much for coming, I appreciate it. Sometimes it's dry stuff. No, it's not dry at all. Yeah, thank you.
Workshop with the other librarians, how we might
Was it-
process that idea.
I did not record it, I think you did some stuff that.
Yes, hopefully, if it doesn't crash, I should have a recording of it.
Okay.
Would you like a link to
The
it?
library?
What?
Will it come through the library?
No, it will not.
Okay.
Are you gonna post it online, like on YouTube?
I will. If you email me, I'll give you a link to it.
Great.
I'll get a.
You share with
picture of the
neighbors.
library,
You're welcome.
I'll send it, or they'll make it available as they do, so. There's a lot of information on it, sure.
Oh my gosh, this was so much, yeah.
You're welcome.
The only thing I wished, other than my husband could have been here, usually our dog comes, he's a dog.
Yeah, there you go.
And he would have felt so at home.
There you go, exactly. I want to make sure it gets some pictures.
Yeah.
Exactly right,
I've
yeah.
got a check where in Spring Hill, and I think they did away with the register their dog.
Could be,
He
yeah.
did it years ago, and then.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep.
Like-